Welcome back. Thanks for once again investing your time and allowing me to share with you. Please check the scriptures to see if what I share with you is valid. These spiritual cliff notes are available to the public on YouTube, and anyone can subscribe, share, and request word posting notifications. No merchandise or donation requests, but my blessing is fulfilled by being permitted to join with others in facing the word. But if what I share provokes your increased focus on the word, even if you do not agree with me, my blessing is prospered. This week's title, I Am. Focus text is found in the book of John, the 18th chapter, verses 2 through 6. Verse 2. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. Verse 3. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Fourth verse. Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, went out and asked them. Verse 5. Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Now, I originally planned to start the introduction of this note with the comment that as we pay attention to the Easter season, we should focus on just who Jesus is. However, I would have been making an error akin to the CEM church attendees. For those of you not familiar with that term, that stands for the Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day only church attendees. But our daily focus should be on who Jesus is, what he thinks about us, and what he is doing for us. We often focus on the scene where Jesus is arrested prior to his sacrifice. But I don't know about you, but one can always benefit from revisiting familiar passages to harvest what we either missed or were not ready to comprehend because of our current spiritual maturity. To relate to what I just said, if you will, recall how beneficial it is to rewatch movies or TV shows that we've seen multiple times, and how often we notice, hear, or understand the connectivity of scenes, trends, or conclusions that had not previously stood out and communicated essence to us. I recently had a similar experience in revisiting our text, which is a familiar word, but I was able to harvest some of the things that I had missed before. In my opinion, I missed significant meat in the text. Let me share what reached out for me in my latest journey through our subject text. First of all, when Jesus was approached, he was approached using the title Jesus of Nazareth. Now, we may have just read that and maybe it didn't mean too much, but in reality, that was a contemptuous expression. You know, basically, they were dogging Jesus when they called him Jesus of Nazareth. They weren't giving credence to who he was, what his power was. They met him with an expression that was meant to make him look bad and feel bad. Right off the bat, the opposition started throwing negative word stones at Jesus right from the jump. But Jesus ignored the word storm and stayed on task to pursue the fulfillment of his mission, his assignment, and his purpose. Now, Jesus is always teaching, and in his reaction to this word storm, it's a good teaching example for us. For when those that used to know us back when, or those that doubt our assignment, mission, or purpose, start throwing word storms at us, we ought to do like Jesus did and stay on task, stay on point, and do what the Lord has given us to do. This in this group that confronted Jesus, there were officials from the chief priest and Pharisees, probably members of the temple guard, who were Jews given authority by the religious leaders to make arrests for minor infractions. The soldiers that were with them may have been a small contingent of Roman soldiers who did not necessarily plan to participate in the arrests, but they were there to make sure that matters didn't get out of hand and out of control. Basically, I view the attendance of the soldiers as backup muscle. But I think that's an important part because, as you probably know, you don't mess around with Roman soldiers because they don't play. Uh, they were very aggressive. Uh, they didn't hesitate to use extreme force. The presence of the soldiers was definitely a threat. But again, another teaching example from Jesus in this, even though he had all this opposition, even though he had all this backup muscle coming at him, he did not hide out. He just went forth and let them know who he was. In the text, verse 18 and 4 uh, states that Jesus knew what was to come, what was coming his way. And in this text, that term knowing uh, indicates Jesus' divine knowledge. The root word that word knowing means or indicates Jesus' divine knowledge. And just as a note, there are 8 times in John's gospel where this knowing, indicating Jesus' divine knowledge, is used in the book of John. And again, since this is a note, and in respect of your time and the time commitment that I have requested, I won't go into all of those, but I have listed the reference scriptures for the 8 times in which this divine knowledge knowing word is used relative to Jesus. in the book of John. So you can check out the description section of this note uh, for those references for your utility and fact checking. After all, I always ask you to check me, see if what I'm saying is valid. But Jesus yielded himself as a voluntary offering. He stepped up, stepped in front of the disciples, basically diverted the attention from his disciples and focused the opposition's attention on the evil, dreadful intent that they were confronting him with. And he makes this statement, and this is what one of the things that really grabbed me because uh, for some reason I hadn't fully wrapped my arms around what was being said here. Jesus says, I am he, since hence the title of this note, I am. When he made that statement, it was basically a declaration of his divinity, the same type of declaration that was made in the first part of Exodus 3:14, in which God said to Moses, I am who I am. Now, when Jesus spoke these words, now these are just spoken words. He didn't rain down a lightning bolt. There was no earthquake. He just spoke the words, I am he. And the power of that spoken word knocked the soldiers to the ground. Man, if you ever had any doubt about the restraint of his power that Jesus used in order to save you and to save me, it's very visible in this text. He had the power to avoid arrest simply by his spoken word, but he chose not to, so that I could be saved and that you could be saved. Definitely worth focusing on, not only on Easter, but every day. And further on in the text that I have not listed in verse 10, Jesus demonstrated further his divinity by using his healing power. In verse 10, it says, Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Verse 11, Jesus commanded Peter, Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup that my Father has given me? When Jesus spoke of the cup, he meant the suffering, isolation, and death that Jesus would have to endure to atone for the sins of the world. But that act of healing was another very loud testimony and divinity validation of the power of Jesus. So, as we've gotten to this point, we see Jesus as who is someone that is going to step out in front of you and complete his mission, that he has the power, by the power of his word, to knock down your enemies and the situations that come against you. And he has the divine power of healing. Does that bring to mind that song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus? When I revisited Jesus' healing of the servant's ear, that made me think of the statement that he made on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What a divine request. And we see that in it in action as he heals the servant of his enemies. He didn't have to do that, but he knew they didn't know what they were doing. Divine validation of the power and authority of Jesus. Now, when we look at the band of disciples and their reaction to Jesus' arrest, they scattered. They were scared. They didn't understand what was going on, and in fact, they would themselves undergo severe testing before they were transformed from hesitant followers to dynamic leaders. But there's also very instructive teaching in their experience for us. Now, we need to be patient with ourselves and undergo self acknowledgement that we are still under construction, that we need to learn, grow, prosper, and serve. Right. If we face the word as we started out, it's not how we will finish. Often, when we look at Peter's actions, we say, "Oh, Peter was so impulsive." But I view what Peter did as an example of active commitment. He wasn't uh, giving any consideration uh, to himself. No, and in this scene, Jesus did not object to the self-defense provision of being armed with a sword. In fact, in other texts, there are times when uh, he told his disciples that if they didn't have one, they should sell their robes and go buy one. But in this instant, defense was not called for according to his mission assignment. Peter is often presented as impulsive, but I see him as being willing to sacrifice himself for his master. Look, you don't come against an armed, fortified group, especially one consisting of Roman soldiers, with one sword, thinking that you are going to survive the incident. In my opinion, Peter's active commitment, regardless of the risk of having his life path significantly changed, is a great example for the attitude that will help us in facing the word, despite what the people that knew us back when, or those that question our mission or our purpose had to say against us and when they come against us. But to follow Peter's example and face the word without fear of change. Now ponder that. Amen.